A dying dog was trapped inside a black trash bag, abandoned by the roadside where no one was supposed to hear him. With the last of his strength, he tore open one tiny gap, and a former Navy SEAL saw it. There were no beating marks, no obvious wounds, only a strange harness and a body slowly fading away. When the clinic lights suddenly went out during the emergency treatment, the rescue no longer felt like mercy.
The lights
it felt
just
like
went
a
out.
warning.
Get the flashlights.
Then the dog growled at the sheriff, and the man's eyes immediately locked onto the harness. What was hidden inside that harness could expose a secret the entire town had been taught to fear. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, like and subscribe, and help us reach 1,000 followers so we can keep writing meaningful stories now. Let's begin. Cale Rowan had been away long enough for the road home to forget him. Or maybe it was the other way around. The northern Montana morning opened bright and cold. The kind of cold that did not roar, but waited. Sunlight spilled over the low hills in thin gold sheets, touching the frost along the fence wire, the pale shoulders of the road, and the dark ranks of pine trees beyond the fields. It made everything look clean from a distance, the way old sins sometimes did before anyone walked close enough to smell them. Cale drove with one hand on the wheel of his old dark green pickup, the other resting near the gear shift out of old habit. He was 35. A former Navy SEAL who no longer wore the uniform but still carried its silence in his posture. He stood about 6 feet tall when out of the truck, broad through the shoulders, lean through the waist, strong, without the swollen look of a man trying to prove strength. His face was clean-shaven, the skin close at the jaw and cheekbones, leaving every hard line visible. Square jaw, high cheekbones, a mouth that rarely wasted motion. His hair was dark brown, cut short in a military style, though a little longer than regulation would have allowed. The northern wind had browned and roughened his fair skin, especially around the eyes and along the bridge of his nose. His eyes were gray-blue, steady in a way that made strangers lower their voices. They did not look cruel. They looked awake, as if Cale had seen too much to judge quickly and remembered too much to trust easily. He wore the same clothes he had driven in for most of the trip back, an old military gray tactical combat shirt, soft from years of wear, the cuffs and shoulders slightly frayed, its color faded by washing, weather, and time. Beneath it showed the edge of a dark red thermal shirt, a little brighter than everything else on him, like one coal refusing to go out. His combat pants were old, too, brown earth and moss green, with worn knees and cargo pockets sagging from use. His boots were battered military work boots, the leather cracked at the creases. On his wrist sat an old military watch with scratches across the face. Nothing about him looked polished. Nothing about him looked uncertain either. He had come back after a long vacation that had not felt much like rest. 2 months of moving from state to state, sleeping in cheap cabins, fishing badly, hiking alone, and telling himself that distance was the same as healing. It wasn't, but distance was easier to organize. The house he was returning to had belonged to his uncle before it became his. A small place outside town, tucked between pine, pasture, and a road that saw more deer than people. Cale had not followed local news while away. He had not checked town gossip, county meetings, who sold land, who closed shops, who stopped waving. So when he crossed back into the county that morning, he did not yet know that the place had changed. He only knew that it felt quieter than it should. The road bent past an old drainage ditch and a line of snow-dusted weeds. Cale slowed instinctively where the pavement cracked into patched gravel. A raven lifted from a fence post and flapped away, black wings blunt against the pale sky. Then something moved near the ditch. Cale's foot eased off the gas. At first, it looked like trash. A black garbage bag had been dumped off the shoulder, half hidden in dead grass and dirty snow. Nothing unusual. People treated empty roads like confession booths, toss the evidence out, and drive on. He almost kept moving. Then, the bag shifted again. Not much. Not enough for most people to notice. A small tremor under the plastic. A faint pressure from inside. The bag's tied mouth had opened a little. Not wide. Just a torn slit where something had pushed against it from within. Cale stopped the truck. For a moment he sat still, engine rumbling, eyes fixed on the bag. The old part of his mind, the part trained to read shadows, wires, windows, disturbed earth woke without asking permission. Could be an animal, Could be bait. Could be nothing. The world rarely gave him nothing. He turned off the engine and stepped out. Cold air pressed against his face, sharp with pine sap, old snow, and road dust. The silence around him was too wide. No other cars, no voices. Only the distant tapping of a loose sign somewhere down the road. Cale moved toward the ditch slowly, boots crushing frost-stiff grass. The bag moved again. This time, he heard it. A sound so small, it seemed embarrassed to exist. Not a bark. Not even a whine. A breath with pain in it. Cale crouched beside the bag. "Easy," he said softly. No answer, of course. Only the thin, wet pull of breathing inside plastic. He took a folding knife from his pocket and cut the knot carefully, then widened the opening. Cold black plastic fell away like the wing of some ugly bird. Inside lay a German Shepherd. For 1 second, Cale did not move. The dog was male, maybe 6 years old, though starvation had carved years into him. His coat should have been beautiful cream gray and black sable, thick along the neck, darker across the back, and muzzle, but dirt and sweat had flattened it. His ribs showed in faint bars beneath the fur. His sides moved with shallow, uneven breaths. His paws were tucked awkwardly beneath him, as if he had fought the bag until his strength failed. Around his chest was a black harness with deep red trim, too tight now against the narrow cage of his body. His eyes opened, amber, clouded with exhaustion, but not empty. Cale had seen that look before, in men and animals both. Not pleading, not soft, something harder. A question. "Who are you?" Cale lowered his hand but did not touch him yet. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. The dog's ears barely moved. One twitched, then flattened again. There was no panic left in him. Panic required energy. What remained was stranger. A thin line of will stretched over an abyss. Cale looked over the body quickly. No obvious broken bones, no fresh blood pouring through the coat, no signs of beating. But on the inner thigh, just above the sparse fur, he saw a small mark, a puncture, faint, nearly hidden. A needle mark. His jaw tightened. "Somebody didn't throw you away," he murmured. "They tried to let you disappear." The dog blinked once. It should have been nothing. To Cale, it felt like an answer. A vehicle moved somewhere behind him. Cale's head turned. Far down the road, near the curve, by the old cottonwoods, a dark SUV sat on the shoulder, too far to read the plate, too still to be passing through. For a moment, sunlight flashed across its windshield. Then it pulled away. No hurry, no squeal of tires, just a smooth departure, like a curtain closing before a play began. Cale watched until it vanished beyond the trees. The ditch felt colder after that. He looked down at the dog again. The shepherd had tried to turn his head toward the sound, but the effort was too much. His muzzle dropped back against the torn plastic. Cale removed his jacket and laid it beside him. The dog's nostrils flared at the movement, not fear, calculation. "You made that hole yourself, didn't you?" Cale said quietly. The dog's paws were scratched raw at the nails. One claw had split. There were marks inside the plastic where he had pushed, dug, bitten, fought. Not enough to free himself. Just enough to create a slit. Enough for one man to notice. A laugh almost came out of Cale then, but it had no humor in it. "That's stubborn," he said. "That's very rude of you, refusing to die after somebody went through all that trouble." The dog's eyes shifted to him again, and for the first time Cale felt something pass through the space between them. Not trust, not yet. Trust was too expensive for creatures who had survived human hands. But recognition? Maybe. A soldier might have called it assessment. A priest might have called it grace. Cale only knew that something in his chest, something he had packed away with old medals and photographs he never looked at, had moved. He worked carefully. First, he loosened the plastic away from the dog's legs. Then, he slid one arm beneath the chest, feeling the harness bite hard against the animal's ribs. The dog's body stiffened, a low sound catching in his throat. "I know," Cale said. "I know. I'd bite me too." He paused, letting the dog feel the stillness of him. No sudden force, no impatience. The shepherd's breathing hitched. His amber eyes stayed locked on Cale's face, as though memorizing it in case the world turned cruel again. Cale lifted him. The dog weighed far less than he should have. Under the dirt and fur, he was all bone, heat, and trembling muscle. K.L. carried him up the ditch slowly, boots slipping once in the frozen mud. The harness pressed against his forearm, and he felt how rigid it was, how oddly built, too structured, too heavy for a simple road dog. He noticed it. Then the dog's breath stuttered, and the thought vanished beneath urgency. "Stay with me," K.L. said. The truck door groaned open. He laid the shepherd across the back seat on his jacket, then reached for an old blanket behind the passenger seat and tucked it around the dog without covering his head. The animal did not fight. That worried K.L. more than resistance would have. Before climbing in, K.L. looked once more down the empty road. The place looked harmless again. A bright northern morning, frost on weeds, a torn garbage bag in the ditch, tire marks fading into dirty snow. But now, he knew better. Some things did not need darkness to be evil. Some things preferred daylight because people trusted it too much. K.L. got behind the wheel and started the truck. The engine turned over rough, then caught. In the rearview mirror, the German shepherd's eyes were half open, fixed not on K.L. but on the road behind them. Watching, remembering, or waiting for whatever had left him there to come back. K.L. pulled onto the road and drove toward the nearest veterinary clinic, faster than he usually drove, but not recklessly. His hands stayed steady on the wheel. His face remained calm. Inside, though, something old had risen. A quiet oath. Not spoken aloud, because men like K.L. had learned that vows made to the air were cheap. But it was there, all the same. Whoever had put that dog in the bag had counted on silence. They had counted on the road. They had counted on the town looking away. And, for a while, maybe the town had... But the dog had torn a hole in the dark, and K.L. Rowan had seen it. K.L. Rowan reached the veterinary clinic with the German shepherd still breathing. Barely. The building sat at the edge of town, where the last stretch of road left the open fields and began gathering signs of human life. A gas station with 2 pumps, a shuttered feed store, a line of mailboxes bent from years of snowplows, and then a low white structure with a blue metal roof and a faded wooden sign that read Shaw Veterinary Care. The clinic looked ordinary in the way useful places often did. Not pretty, not polished, just stubbornly there. Its paint had weathered at the corners. The front steps were swept clean, but worn hollow in the middle. A row of old planters sat beneath the windows, empty now except for frozen soil and the brittle stems of last autumn's flowers. K.L. parked crookedly near the entrance, killed the engine, and opened the back door. The dog's eyes were half open. Amber, dim, still watching. "Easy," K.L. said under his breath. He slid both arms beneath the German shepherd and lifted him carefully from the seat. The animal made a low sound, not loud enough to be called a cry, but enough to tighten something behind K.L.'s ribs. The harness dug into the dog's chest as K.L. carried him, and again K.L. felt that wrongness in it. The stiff weight, the pressure, the way the straps seemed less like protection and more like a hand closing. Inside, the clinic smelled of disinfectant, damp wool, old wood, and the faint sharpness of animal fear. A bell over the door gave one tired ring. A young receptionist looked up from behind the counter. She was maybe 22, thin and pale, with strawberry blonde hair tied in a loose knot, and freckles scattered across the bridge of her nose. Her name tag read Mara, though the letters had been rubbed nearly silver at the edges. She had the nervous posture of someone who had learned to speak softly before she had learned why. Her eyes dropped to the dog in K.L.'s arms. The color drained from her face. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Doctor," K.L. said, "now." Mara stood so quickly her chair rolled back and bumped the wall. "Dr. Shaw," she called, her voice cracking halfway through the name. A woman came out from the back room, almost immediately. Dr. Evelyn Shaw did not look like someone who wasted fear on things that could still be done. She was 42, medium height, compact and strong through the shoulders, with dark brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck. A few strands had escaped around her temples, not artfully, but because she had been working since before dawn. Her skin had the warm olive tone of someone who had spent more time in barns and open fields than under office lights. Her face was narrow, but steady, with tired eyes that still missed very little. She wore a faded blue-gray Henley under a canvas work jacket, dark jeans, and scuffed brown boots. There was no softness in the way she moved, but there was mercy in it, the practical kind. The kind that showed up with clean hands and sharp instruments when sentiment would only get in the way. "What happened?" she asked. "Found him sealed in a garbage bag off County Road 6, Cale said. "Still alive, barely." Evelyn's expression changed, but only in the eyes. "Table," she said. Cale carried the dog into the exam room and laid him on the metal table. The surface was cold under the animal's body, and the shepherd flinched weakly. Evelyn was already pulling gloves on. "Mara, warm fluids, emergency kit, oxygen, now." Mara moved quickly, but not smoothly. Fear made her hands clumsy. She dropped a roll of gauze, snatched it up, then looked at the dog again as if she wished she hadn't. Cale stayed at the table. Evelyn checked the dog's gums, then his eyes, then pressed 2 fingers to the inside of his rear leg. Her face hardened. "Severe dehydration," she said. "Shock. Body temperature unstable." She moved the fur near the thigh and paused. "Needle mark." "I saw it." "No obvious blunt trauma," she continued. "No broken ribs that I can feel right now. No major external bleeding." "That should be good." "It would be," Evelyn said, "if he didn't look like his body was shutting down from the inside." The dog's breathing hitched. Cale looked at the harness. It was too tight. He saw it fully now. The dog's chest could not expand properly under the strap. Every breath fought the gear as much as the weakness. "This needs to come off," Cale said. Evelyn glanced at it. Carefully. Cale slipped his fingers beneath the main chest strap. The dog stiffened at once. His lips moved back from his teeth, but no growl came. There was not enough strength for warning, only memory. "I know," Cale said softly. "I'd hate this too." He worked slowly, easing the buckle free, loosening one strap, then another. The harness resisted more than it should have. Its material was heavy, black, with deep red trim that might once have looked sharp, but now seemed almost cruel against the dog's sunken frame. It was newer than the dog's condition suggested, newer than the dirt ground into the fur beneath it. Too well made, too intentional. When the final strap came loose, the dog drew one deeper breath. Not easy. Just less impossible. Evelyn noticed. So did Cale. For a second, the shepherd's amber eyes shifted toward him. There was pain in them. But beneath the pain, something else. A recognition so brief, Cale almost doubted it. Then the dog looked away. Cale stood there with the harness in his hands. It was heavier than expected. The inner padding felt uneven in one place, but Evelyn spoke before his mind could settle on the thought. "Hold that for now," she said. "I need space." Cale stepped back. Mara returned with supplies. Evelyn inserted an IV with steady precision, murmuring instructions rather than comfort. Comfort, Cale knew, was sometimes a luxury medicine could not afford. Oxygen followed. Warm blankets. A monitor clipped into place. The dog's heart rate appeared in a trembling green line. Too fast. Too weak. The clinic lights hummed above them. Then they died. Everything went black. For one breath, no one moved. The monitor gave a shrill complaint and went silent. The oxygen machine stopped its low mechanical whisper. Somewhere in the building, a refrigerator motor cut off with a heavy click. Mara gasped. Evelyn did not. "Backup light," she said. Cale was already reaching for the flashlight clipped to his belt. He switched it on, flooding the table with a hard white circle. The German shepherd lay in that light like a creature caught between worlds, ribs rising shallowly, mouth slightly open, one paw twitching against the towel. "Mara, battery pack. I don't know if..." "You do know. Cabinet by the sink, bottom shelf." The young woman moved. Cale held the light steady. Outside the exam room, the clinic had fallen into a strange, listening darkness. No storm beat against the roof. No wind screamed hard enough to take a power line. Through the front window, daylight still lay calmly across the parking lot. Only this building had gone dark. Evelyn worked by flashlight. Her hands did not shake, though the muscles in her jaw had tightened. She pushed medication into the IV line, checked the dog's airway, adjusted the blanket, and swore once under her breath when a piece of equipment refused to restart on battery. Cale watched her face. Not panic, not confusion, anger. She had seen enough to know when misfortune arrived wearing boots. A sound came from the treatment table. The German shepherd's head had turned, not toward Cale, toward the hallway. His ears, weak moments ago, lifted a fraction. A low sound formed in his chest. It was almost too faint to hear, but Cale heard it. A growl. That was the moment the air changed. Not because of the darkness. Because the dog, half dead and drowning in exhaustion, had found enough strength to hate something he could not yet see. The bell over the front door rang. Mara froze in the hallway with the battery pack in her hands. Evelyn looked up. Cale lowered the flashlight beam from the table and aimed it toward the doorway. A man stood near the reception desk, half shadowed by the pale daylight behind him. Sheriff Nolan Bryce was in his mid-50s, tall and spare, with the dry, hard build of a man shaped by outdoor work and old authority. His face was deeply lined from sun and weather, the skin around his eyes creased in permanent squints. He was clean-shaven except for the faint gray shadow along his jaw, and his hair, mostly iron gray with a darker thread still running through it, was combed neatly beneath his sheriff's hat. His uniform was immaculate, too immaculate for that hour of the morning. Tan shirt, dark tie, polished badge, creased trousers, boots wiped clean of mud. He carried himself with a calm that did not soothe, it controlled. He looked like a man who had learned long ago that he did not need to raise his voice if everyone already knew they were supposed to listen. Mara said there was a possible animal hazard, he said. Mara's face tightened with shame. I only called dispatch because... It's fine, Bryce said, not looking at her. His gaze moved past Evelyn, past the emergency table, past the dying dog, then stopped on the harness in Cale's hand. Only for a second. But Cale had spent too many years noticing the second people tried to hide. The dog growled again. This time, Evelyn heard it. Sheriff Bryce took one step into the room. The German shepherd's body tensed under the blankets, weak muscles trying to remember a stronger shape. His lips trembled away from his teeth. Bryce looked down at him. Something flickered in the sheriff's face. Not surprise exactly. Recognition's colder cousin. Then it was gone. That the animal? Bryce asked. Cale did not answer at once. Evelyn's voice stayed flat. He is under emergency care. Could be carrying something. Bryce turned his attention to Cale. You found him? Yes. Where? Cale watched him. Why? Public safety. County Road 6. Bryce nodded slowly, as if confirming a fact he already owned. Bad place to pick up strays. He was sealed in a bag. That happens. Bryce's tone did not change. People panic. Sick animal, maybe contagious, maybe aggressive. They make poor choices. Evelyn looked at him then, and her eyes sharpened. This dog wasn't dumped because he was sick. Bryce's gaze did not move from Cale. You a vet now, Dr. Shaw? No, I'm the vet. That's why I said it. A tiny silence followed. Mara stood in the hallway, battery pack clutched to her chest like a child holding a shield. Bryce extended one hand toward Cale. I'll take the harness. Cale looked at the hand, then at the sheriff's face. No. The word was quiet. It landed hard anyway. Bryce's fingers remained open for another moment before lowering. It may be contaminated. Then you don't want it. Evelyn made a small sound that might have been a breath, might have been approval. Bryce's eyes shifted, not angry, not yet, measuring. You've been gone a while, Rowan. Cale felt the sentence enter the room like cold water. Not a question. Not conversation. A reminder. Long enough, Cale said. Then maybe you don't know how things work here right now. The dog's growl deepened, ragged but unmistakable. Cale stepped slightly between Bryce and the table. I know how a dying dog sounds when he recognizes someone. That did it. Not visibly, not enough for Mara or maybe even Evelyn to name. But the sheriff's expression closed. The clean public face settled into place, smoother than before. I'm advising caution, Bryce said. That's all. Advice received. Bryce looked once more at the harness, then at the dog. Keep him isolated, he said, for everyone's sake. He turned and walked out. The bell rang again. A few seconds later, the clinic lights came back on. The monitor chirped. The oxygen machine restarted with a low mechanical sigh. From somewhere in the back, the refrigerator motor awakened and began to hum as if nothing had happened. No one spoke. Cale stood with the harness still in his hand, feeling its weight. Evelyn bent over the dog again, but but her face had changed. The emergency was still in front of her, flesh and breath and failing strength. Yet something else had entered the room now, something medicine could not diagnose. Mara whispered from the hallway. Power company said there's no outage. Evelyn did not look up. Cale looked at the dog. The German Shepherd's eyes were half closed now, his body spent by the effort of survival and warning. But one paw had shifted slightly toward Cale's side of the table, claws resting against the metal edge. As if, even nearly gone, he had chosen where to reach. Cale set the harness down beside him, but he did not let it out of his sight. Not anymore. Outside, the northern morning remained bright. Inside the clinic, the light had returned. But none of them believed it had come back clean. The power stayed on after Sheriff Nolan Bryce left. That should have made the clinic feel safer. It didn't. The lights above the exam table hummed with their old, tired brightness, throwing a clean white glare over stainless steel, glass bottles, folded gauze, and the German Shepherd lying under warmed blankets. The machines had started breathing again in their mechanical way, filling the room with small sounds that ought to have belonged to order. The soft tick of a monitor, the whisper of oxygen, the faint drip of fluid running through a clear line. But Cale Rowan had learned long ago that danger did not always leave when the door closed. Sometimes it stepped outside and waited. Dr. Evelyn Shaw worked without speaking for several minutes after the sheriff's departure. Her face remained calm, but it was not the same calm as before. Before, it had been medical calm. Steady, focused, built around what could be cut, cleaned, stitched, warmed, measured. Now it had a harder edge. A woman did not run a rural clinic for years without learning the difference between bad luck and a hand placed deliberately on the scale. Mara stood near the doorway with the battery pack still in her arms, though it was no longer needed. Her thin fingers clutched the plastic casing so tightly the knuckles had gone pale. The young receptionist's strawberry blonde hair had come loose around her face, and her freckles stood out against skin gone almost gray. She kept looking at the front room, then back toward the rear hallway, as if afraid the sheriff's shadow might have remained behind, even after the man himself had left. Cale noticed that she did not ask questions. That bothered him. People who were truly surprised asked too many. People who were afraid of knowing asked none. Evelyn adjusted the IV flow and listened to the dog's chest with a stethoscope. The German Shepherd's breathing had improved slightly without the harness pressing him down, but every breath still seemed negotiated, as if his body had to decide whether survival was worth another attempt. "Will he make it?" Cale asked. Evelyn did not answer quickly. That was one of the reasons Cale trusted her more than he expected to. She did not decorate uncertainty. "He made it this far," she said at last. "That matters, but he's not out of danger." The dog's eyes were closed now, lashes dark against the dirt-matted cream and gray fur of his face. His muzzle had a black saddle of color along the bridge, and the fur around his ears was darker, almost charcoal, giving him the worn, noble look of an animal carved from winter ash. Even unconscious, he did not look peaceful. He looked like something still standing guard inside his own failing body. Cale looked down at the harness lying near his hand. Black fabric, deep red trim, heavy stitching, too structured. He should have opened it then. The thought came clear enough to be useful. Instead, he slid it beneath his arm, not because he dismissed it. Because the dog was still alive by a thread, and Cale's mind, trained to prioritize, put breath before mystery. That was sensible. That was disciplined. Later, he would hate how sensible it had been. From the front room came the small jingle of the doorbell. Mara flinched. A woman stepped inside, carrying an empty pet carrier, and stopped when she saw the mood of the clinic. She was in her late 60s, short and narrow-shouldered, with white hair pinned tightly at the back of her head and a face that looked as though it had been folded by weather and worry. Her coat was lavender but faded nearly gray at the cuffs, and she wore the careful expression of someone who had spent most of her life trying not to cause trouble. "Dr. Shaw?" she called softly. Evelyn came to the exam room doorway. "Mrs. Bell, I'm sorry, we're behind this morning." The old woman's eyes moved past Evelyn to Cale, then to the treatment table where the shepherd lay mostly hidden beneath blankets. For a second, something changed in her face. Recognition, perhaps, or fear, arriving before thought. Then, she looked away. "I can come back," she said. You drove all the way in, Evelyn replied. Give us 10 minutes. Mrs. Bell's hands tightened around the empty carrier. No, that's all right. Her voice had become thinner. Mara stepped forward. Mrs. Bell, your cat's medicine. I'll call, the woman said, and she left so quickly the bell over the door struck twice. Cale watched the glass door settle. Evelyn saw him watching. She's nervous, Evelyn said. That what we're calling it? The doctor held his gaze for a moment, and in that silence, Cale understood she would not lie to him easily, but she might still choose not to say everything, not from cowardice, from calculation. People in small towns measured truth like winter fuel. Too much burned at once could leave everyone freezing later. Mara finally set the battery pack down. People have been strange lately, she said. Evelyn turned her head. Mara. The young woman shut her mouth. Cale looked at her. Strange how? Mara swallowed. Her eyes flicked toward Evelyn first, asking permission without words. Evelyn looked tired suddenly, older in the shoulders than she had in the exam room. Appointments canceled, Mara said quietly. People asking if certain roads are safe. Some don't want us logging their names when they come in. A man brought a goat last week and parked behind the building like he didn't want anyone seeing him here. For a goat? Cale asked. Mara's mouth trembled in a humorless attempt at a smile. It was a very private goat. For half a second, the room almost remembered how to be human. Then the shepherd twitched under the blanket, and the moment vanished. Evelyn went back to him. That's enough. But not because Mara had said something false. Because she had said something true too early. Cale understood the shape of the chapter he had walked into now. Not the plot, not yet, but the weather of it. This town was carrying something under its tongue. Something bitter enough that no one wanted to swallow and no one dared spit out. The dog slept for most of the afternoon. Evelyn continued treatment, checking his temperature, changing fluids, cleaning the needle mark, examining him for injuries that were not obvious beneath the fur. She found bruising under the harness straps, old pressure sores hidden by the coat, and dehydration so severe his skin lifted too slowly when pinched, but still no clear sign of beating. Whoever did this, she said, didn't lose control. Cale looked up. She did not soften the words. That's what bothers me. This wasn't rage. It was management. Outside, sunlight moved across the clinic windows and turned the parking lot pale gold. Cars came and went on the road beyond, but fewer stopped than Cale expected. Twice, vehicles slowed near the clinic entrance before continuing on. Once, a pickup with a cracked windshield pulled into the lot, idled for nearly 30 seconds, then backed out and drove away. Mara pretended not to notice. Evelyn noticed and said nothing. Cale noticed and remembered every vehicle. Late in the afternoon, when the dog's breathing had stabilized enough to move him, Evelyn washed her hands at the sink and stared out the small window above it. He shouldn't stay here tonight, she said. Cale had been expecting the opposite. Why? Because if I keep him here, I have staff, records, locked cabinets, other animals, people coming in and out. She dried her hands slowly. And because someone already proved they can cut power to this building. You think he's safer with me? I think you're harder to intimidate than Mara. From the front desk, Mara called. I heard that. You were meant to, Evelyn said. A ghost of a smile touched Cale's mouth and left quickly. Evelyn turned back to him. I'll send fluids, antibiotics, instructions. He needs warmth, quiet, small amounts of water. No food yet unless I say. If he worsens, you call me. If he collapses, you bring him back. If anyone asks, he's under veterinary care and not available. That last part sound like medical advice? It sounds like common sense wearing a white coat. Cale looked at the dog. The shepherd's eyes had opened again. Not fully, just enough to reveal that amber gleam beneath heavy lids. He was watching Cale. Not Evelyn. Not Mara. Cale. The look was not affectionate. It was not grateful in the easy way people liked rescued animals to be. It was wary, exhausted, and direct. A creature standing at the broken gate of himself, deciding whether the man before him was another storm or a possible shelter. Cale felt the weight of that look more than he wanted to. I don't even know his name, he said. Evelyn checked the dog's pulse again. Maybe he doesn't want the one he had. That stayed with him. By early evening, Cale carried the German Shepherd out through the side door to avoid the front room. Evelyn walked with him, holding the bag of supplies. Mara remained behind the counter, pretending to organize paperwork while watching the windows. The air outside had turned colder. The bright day was thinning toward blue, and the shadows of pine trees stretched long over the clinic lot. Across the street, near the closed feed store, an older man stood beside a newspaper box. He was tall but stooped, with a narrow face, a gray mustache, and a brown wool cap pulled low over his ears. His coat hung loose from his frame, as if he had once been heavier and life had taken the extra from him. He did not move when Cale came out. He only watched the dog in Cale's arms. Then, very slowly, he took off his cap, not to Kyle, to the dog. The gesture was small, almost foolish, but it struck Cale harder than any warning. Evelyn saw it too. Her face changed. "Who is that?" Cale asked. "Tom Arlen," she said. "Retired lineman. Lost his son 3 winters ago." "How?" Evelyn's mouth tightened. "Depends who you ask." Tom Arlen put his cap back on, turned, and walked away, without another word. The shepherd stirred in Cale's arms. His head lifted an inch. His eyes followed the old man until he disappeared around the corner of the feed store. Then the dog made a sound. Not a growl this time. Not a whine. Something softer and more broken, like recognition passing through pain without finding a place to rest. Cale stood still. Evelyn did not speak. The evening seemed to hold that small sound in its hands. By the time Cale reached his house, the first stars had begun to appear over the dark pine ridge. The place looked almost unchanged. Narrow porch, weathered boards, metal roof, 2 chairs left out all season because Cale had never learned the habit of putting things away just to prove he cared about them. The windows reflected the last of the sky. Inside, the house smelled of cold wood, dust, and the faint mineral scent of disuse. Cale set the dog on a thick blanket near the stove, then built a small fire. The shepherd did not try to rise. He only watched Cale move around the room, eyes following each step, each turn, each reach of the hand. Cale placed the harness on the table. He looked at it. The uneven padding, the heavy seam, the red trim. Open it. The thought came again. He stood over the table for a long moment. Then the dog's breathing changed, shallow and uneven, and Kyle turned away to check him. He told himself the harness could wait until morning. Outside, wind moved through the pines. Inside, the German Shepherd lay between sleep and survival, refusing to surrender either. Cale sat in the chair beside him with Evelyn's instructions on his knee, his old military watch ticking softly in the quiet. The town had not spoken, but its silence had. And Cale, who had returned home thinking he was only passing back through old rooms and old roads, began to understand that he had not come back to a place at rest. He had come back to a place holding its breath. The house did not sleep easily that night. Cale Rowan had always liked that about old places. New houses hid their unease behind sealed windows, smooth walls, soft machines, and lights that came on with the brush of a finger. Old houses admitted everything. Wind found the seams. Wood complained when the temperature fell. Pipes muttered in the walls. The roof clicked as frost tightened its grip on the metal. A man could sit inside such a house and know he was not the only thing still awake. The German Shepherd lay on the blanket near the stove, his body turned slightly toward the heat. The fire had settled into orange coals behind the iron door, giving the room a low, pulsing glow. In that light, the dog's cream-gray-black coat looked softer than it had in the clinic, though his ribs still showed beneath the fur. His ears moved sometimes, not rising fully, but catching sounds from the corners of the room. One amber eye would open, measure Cale, then close again. Cale sat in the chair beside him with Evelyn Shaw's notes in one hand and a ceramic mug of coffee cooling untouched near the other. The instructions were precise. Small amounts of water, no food yet, keep warm, monitor breathing, call if vomiting, call if collapse, call if gums turn pale, call if anything changes. Anything. That word would have been funny if the night were kinder. A half-dead dog sealed in a trash bag, a power cut at the clinic, a sheriff who asked for a harness before asking whether the animal would live, a town that looked away so carefully it might as well have been praying to silence. Anything had already changed. Cale lowered the paper and looked at the harness lying on the kitchen table. Black material, deep red trim, heavy seams, buckles, dulled by use but not old enough to match the dog's condition. It sat there, like an object, pretending to be harmless. He had wiped dirt from the outer straps with a damp cloth, more out of habit than curiosity. Now that it was clean enough to study, the wrongness seemed stronger. It was too new. Not shiny, not factory fresh, but newer than a harness should be on a dog that looked as if he had been starved by seasons. The fabric showed wear in specific places, intentional places, as if it had been used hard but not long. The padding on one side lay thicker than the other. The inner seam along the chest panel was slightly raised. Cale reached toward it. The dog stirred. Not much. Just enough. His head lifted from the blanket, and both eyes opened. They fixed not on Cale's face, but on the harness. The dog's body tightened. His breathing, which had been shallow but steady, changed into quick little pulls. Cale stopped. "All right," he said quietly. "Not tonight." He did not know why he said it. Perhaps because some part of him understood that the object did not belong only to evidence. It belonged to fear. And fear, in a wounded animal, could kill what medicine had only just begun to save. Still, the dog needed something safer if he was going to move at all. The harness from the road had left bruised pressure marks along his chest and under his forelegs. Evelyn had wrapped the worst of the rubbed skin, but Cale did not like the idea of the dog wearing nothing if he had to be lifted quickly. A collar would choke him. A leash would be useless. The animal was too weak to manage stairs or sudden movement, and Cale had no intention of dragging him by the neck if the night turned bad. He stood and crossed to the mudroom. There, on a hook near the back door, hung a harness he had not touched in almost a year. It belonged to the dog Cale used to have. The name came into his mind before he could stop it. Ash. Ash had been a German Shepherd too, larger than this one, darker across the back, with a foolish fondness for stealing socks and a soldier's seriousness whenever thunder rolled over the valley. He had died the year before Cale left on his long trip, old and heavy with pain. His muzzle gone white, his amber-brown eyes still trying to follow Cale from room to room, even when his legs could not. Cale had never thrown the harness away. It was black with deep red stitching, faded in places, worn soft by weather and use. It looked, in the dim mudroom light, enough like the road dog's harness to make Cale pause. Same working style, same handle across the back, same dark shape against the wall. He took it down carefully. A small comedy of grief whispered through him. "Hope you don't mind," he murmured to the absence of the old dog. "You always hated sharing." The house, being old and unkind, answered with a creak from the floorboards. Cale brought the harness back and knelt beside the shepherd. The dog watched him approach. No growl, no retreat, only that steady, exhausted assessment. "This one doesn't bite," Cale said. The dog did not look convinced. The act of fitting the harness took time. Cale moved slowly, one strap at a time, letting the dog smell the material before sliding it beneath him. The old harness was softer, wider in the right places, and loose enough to avoid the bruised chest. The shepherd flinched when Cale touched the sore areas, but he did not snap. When the buckle clicked, the dog's eyes shut briefly. Cale froze, expecting panic. Instead, the dog exhaled. Not relief exactly. Recognition's gentler brother. Cale rested one hand lightly on the top handle. "That better?" The dog opened one eye. The look said nothing generous. Cale almost smiled. "Well," he said, "you're alive enough to judge me." Outside, the wind shifted. The dog's head lifted. This time, the movement was sharper. Cale's smile vanished. He listened. At first there was only the ordinary night, the stove settling, pine branches scratching faintly against each other, distant open land breathing cold. Then, beneath those sounds, something else. A tire over gravel. Slow, too slow. Cale stood without noise. The dog tried to rise. "No," Cale whispered, but the shepherd pushed his front legs beneath him anyway. His body trembled with the effort. One paw slid slightly on the old rug, and pain passed through his face like a shadow under water. Still, he got his chest off the floor. Then he turned toward the back of the house. Not the front road. The back. KL moved to the kitchen window and angled himself beside the frame, not in front of it. Outside, darkness gathered thick between the pines. The moon was thin, the yard mostly silver and black. His pickup sat near the porch. Beyond it, the drive curved toward the road. Nothing. The dog made a sound low in his throat. KL looked down. The shepherd's gaze was locked toward the mudroom door, toward the part of the house that faced the woodpile, the shed, the line of trees. KL went still. There are moments when training does not speak in words. It does not say danger, move, prepare. It simply removes delay from the body. KL crossed to the table, picked up the original harness, and moved it without thinking into the lower cabinet beside the stove. Not hidden perfectly, just not visible. Then, he killed the lamp. The room fell into firelight. A minute passed. Then another. The back door handle moved. Slowly. KL stood in the shadow beside the mudroom entrance, one hand around the heavy iron poker from near the stove. His pistol was locked in the bedroom safe, too far away for a soundless reach. That was his mistake, and he owned it immediately. Men who believed safety had returned because the fire was warm deserved whatever corrected them. The handle stopped. A faint metallic scrape followed. Someone working the lock. Not a drunk neighbor. Not a lost traveler. Not a kid trying foolishness. Careful. Practiced. The dog stood fully now. Somehow. His legs shook so badly KL could see the tremor travel through the harness across his shoulders. Yet he placed himself between the mudroom and the stove, angled slightly in front of KL, as if the old logic in his bones knew exactly where threat entered and where a man should stand. Easy, KL breathed. The dog ignored him. The lock gave. The back door opened 3 inches. Cold came in first. Then a figure, tall, narrow, dressed in dark work clothes, face hidden beneath a black knit cap, and a scarf pulled over the lower half. He moved with the quick certainty of someone who had studied the house from outside. Behind him, another shape waited in the yard, broader, heavier, one hand lifted in signal. The first man stepped into the mudroom. He did not look around like a burglar. He did not glance toward the boots, the old tools, the coat rack, the drawer where KL kept spare cash. His eyes went straight to the hook by the door, the place where a harness had been hanging earlier. When he saw the hook empty, his head turned. Straight toward the dog. Straight toward the black and red harness now on the shepherd's body. KL understood then. Not everything. Enough. They had known what they were looking for. And they had expected it to be where it had been before. The intruder took one step toward the dog. The shepherd lunged. It was not graceful. It was not strong. His body failed halfway through the motion, but the intent in it was so violent and sudden that the man flinched back hard against the doorframe. The dog's bark broke out of him raw and ragged, more pain than volume, but in the small house it sounded like a bell cracked by lightning. KL moved. He crossed the distance in 3 strides and drove the iron poker sideways into the intruder's forearm. The man cursed and dropped something that struck the floor with a dull plastic clatter. A small flashlight rolled under the bench. The second figure outside shouted, "Move!" The first man staggered back through the doorway. KL followed only as far as the threshold, enough to see the broader figure grab the intruder by the jacket and drag him toward the trees. No headlights came on. No engine roared nearby. They had left their vehicle farther out, or come on foot. Smart. Not smart enough. KL stepped onto the back porch and raised the poker as if inviting them to reconsider. They did not. The 2 shapes vanished into the pines. For 3 seconds, the yard held only wind. Then, the shepherd collapsed behind him. KL turned so fast his shoulder hit the doorframe. The dog lay on his side near the mudroom, breathing hard, the old harness twisted slightly across his ribs. His eyes were open, fixed on the door as if the men might come back through it by force of memory alone. KL knelt beside him. "You idiot," he said, voice low and rough. "Brave, stupid, judgmental idiot." The dog's gaze shifted to him. His tail did not wag. His ears did not lift. But one paw moved, barely, until it touched the edge of KL's boot. That small contact did more to the room than any prayer might have. KL sat back on his heels, listening to his own breathing. The original harness remained in the cabinet by the stove. The old harness was still on the dog. The men had left with nothing. No money taken. No drawers opened. No tools missing. No attempt to search once discovered. They had come for one thing. Cale rose slowly and shut the back door, then wedged a chair beneath the handle. After that, he retrieved the dropped flashlight with a cloth and set it on the table. Cheap, black plastic, no markings. He looked at the empty hook in the mudroom, then at the dog, then at the cabinet. The thought he had postponed all evening returned, no longer quiet. Open it. Outside, the pines swayed under the moon, as if shaking their heads at the stubbornness of men. Inside, Cale stood in his old house with a wounded dog at his feet, an untouched harness hidden beside the stove, and the certainty that whoever had marked this animal had followed that mark all the way home. The town might not speak, but now the night had. Cale Rowan did not open the harness right away. He stood in the kitchen for nearly a minute after the back door had been wedged shut, listening to the old house breathe around him. The fire had sunk lower in the stove, throwing red light across the floorboards. Outside, the pines moved in the wind with a long, dry whisper, as if the forest had seen the men run and had decided not to tell. The German shepherd lay near the mudroom, chest heaving from the effort of what he had done. The old harness that once belonged to Ash sat crooked across his narrow body. It looked too large on him, too full of a life he had not yet grown back into. His cream gray-black fur rose and fell in uneven waves. His eyes remained open, amber and watchful, fixed on the back door. Cale crouched beside him. "You're still with me," he said. The dog's gaze shifted to him. There was no softness there. Not yet. But there was something that had not been there before the break-in. Recognition, not trust. Trust was a kingdom built one stone at a time, and this dog had lived among men who burned kingdoms for heat. But recognition was enough for the night. Enough for Cale to understand the animal had not lunged because of training alone. He had chosen a side. Cale checked the dog's gums, his breathing, the pressure of the replacement harness. Evelyn Shaw's instructions lay open on the chair, and he followed them with the concentration of a man diffusing something fragile. Small water, no food, warmth. Watch for collapse. Only after the dog's breathing steadied did Cale rise. The original harness waited in the cabinet beside the stove. He opened the door and took it out. In his hands, it felt less like equipment now, and more like a sealed message from someone who had run out of time. Black tactical fabric, deep red trim, heavy inner padding, a chest panel stiff enough to hide more than stitching. Cale placed it on the table and turned on the lamp. The circle of yellow light made everything beyond it darker. He fetched a small toolkit from the mudroom, set it beside the harness, and sat down. The house seemed to quiet itself, as if listening. Even the dog's breathing, though still rough, became part of the rhythm of the room. Cale examined the harness slowly. Men who rushed through hidden things often destroyed what they were meant to find. He had learned that in places where a loose wire could be a doorbell or a death sentence, depending on who had made it. His fingers moved over buckles, seams, reinforced loops, inner lining. There, the raised seam along the chest plate. Not much, a 1/4 inch too thick, a thread pattern slightly different from the rest. If he had been tired, careless, or less suspicious, he would have missed it. Whoever had hidden something there had done it with steady hands. Cale took the smallest blade from the kit and eased it beneath the thread. The dog lifted his head. Cale paused. The shepherd stared at the harness on the table, ears low, eyes bright with fever and memory. "I'm not putting it back on you," Cale said quietly. The dog did not relax, but he did not look away either. Cale cut the seam. Inside the padding, wrapped in thin waterproof tape, was a small USB drive. For a long moment, he simply stared at it. Not because he was surprised, because the discovery made everything before it arrange itself into a shape he did not like. The bag beside the road, the needle mark, the power cut, the sheriff's eyes on the harness, the men at his back door moving with purpose, not greed. The dog had not been abandoned. He had been carrying something, and someone had tried to bury both messenger and message in black plastic. Cale held the USB between 2 fingers. It was small enough to disappear in a closed fist. Small enough to kill for, apparently. He did not plug it into his own computer. That was the first rule of strange data. Never let the serpent into your own house if you could study its shadow somewhere else. He took an old offline laptop from a locked drawer, a machine he used for documents he did not want touching the internet. It was outdated, ugly, and slow, which was why he trusted it. The screen came alive and pale blue. The USB loaded after a delay. One folder. No title. Inside were video files, root sheets, scanned documents, and a text file named simply, "If Found." Cale opened the text first. Only 6 lines appeared. "If this reaches someone clean, keep the dog alive. His name is not on paper. The harness carries enough to start it. Bryce protects the road, not the law. Tell Voss. Do not trust local channels." Cale leaned back. The old house felt colder. The German Shepherd made a faint sound from the floor. At the word dog, perhaps, or at the name Bryce, or at something in Cale's breathing that had changed before he noticed it himself. Cale looked at him. "What did they make you carry?" he asked. The dog lowered his head slowly, but his eyes stayed open. Cale opened the first video. The image trembled, low to the ground, the angle strange, until he understood. A camera mounted near chest height on a moving animal. Concrete floor. Boots. Wooden pallets. A loading bay lit by harsh white lamps. Men carrying crates without labels. A truck with county relief markings on the side. Then a voice. Muffled. Male. Angry. "Get him out before Bryce changes the route." The video jerked as the dog moved. A man appeared in frame for half a second, kneeling close. Mid-40s, lean, with rough brown hair and a narrow face made gaunt by stress. He had the look of someone who had slept badly for months and kept working anyway. His eyes were gentle when he looked into the camera, which meant he was looking at the dog. "Good boy," the man whispered. The German Shepherd on the floor suddenly tried to rise. Cale turned. The dog's body trembled. His ears had lifted halfway. His amber eyes were locked on the screen, not confused, not frightened in the simple way of an animal hearing noise. Remembering. On the laptop, the man's hand entered frame. It touched the camera, then the dog's muzzle. "Run if I tell you," the man said. "Don't wait for me." The shepherd made a sound that seemed to come from a wound deeper than the body. Cale shut the laptop halfway. Silence returned. But not the same silence. Somewhere inside that broken animal, a name had been struck like a bell. Cale had no right to know it yet. Still, he felt the echo. The knock at the front door came at 1:17 a.m. 3 soft taps. Not hurried. Not timid. Cale closed the laptop fully and moved without sound. The German Shepherd lifted his head again, but this time he did not growl. His body stiffened, uncertain. Cale picked up the iron poker from beside the table and moved to the front window, staying beside the frame. A woman stood on the porch. She was alone. Early 40s, compact, dark-haired, and still in the way predators and professionals could both be still. She wore a charcoal field jacket, dark utility pants, and boots that had seen wet roads that night. Her hair was pulled back tight at the nape of her neck. Her face was sharp rather than pretty, with high cheekbones, a firm mouth, and eyes that seemed to measure exits before expressions. One hand was visible at her side. The other held up a leather ID wallet toward the window. "Cale Rowan," she called, voice low. "My name is Lena Voss, Federal Investigation Unit. I'm not here for the dog. I'm here because somebody else is." Cale did not open the door immediately. "Badge can be bought." "So can uniforms," she replied. "You learned that today." He said nothing. She looked toward the darker side of the house, where the pines stood close. "2 men came through your back door less than 10 minutes ago. One limping now, probably forearm injury. They cut across the tree line toward an old service road. If I were with them, I wouldn't be knocking." Cale opened the door 6 inches, chain still on. Lena Voss looked smaller up close than her presence suggested. She was maybe 5'6", built narrow but hard, with the kind of discipline that made tiredness look like a decision rather than a condition. There were faint shadows under her eyes. Not weakness. Work. Her gaze moved once over Cale's face, the poker in his hand, the chain on the door, then past him toward the dim room. "Is he alive?" she asked. Cale's eyes narrowed. "The dog?" "Yes." "You know him?" "I know what he was carrying." The chain remained in place. Lena exhaled through her nose, not impatient, but controlled. We've been tracking a logistics network moving through this county for 11 months. On paper, it's relief supply, rural medical support, fuel transport. In reality, some shipments don't match manifests. Some people tied to those routes vanish, and every local inquiry dies before it grows legs. Because of Bryce. Her eyes sharpened slightly. So you opened it. Enough. Lena nodded once. Then you understand why I'm here. Not yet. For months, we had a source inside the network. A handler, not law enforcement, contracted through one of their fronts to train dogs for route work and perimeter warning. He was supposed to hand over data. He disappeared before the meet. Her voice stayed even, but something hardened beneath it. We thought the evidence disappeared with him. Cale glanced back at the German Shepherd. The dog was watching Lena now. Not calm, not hostile. Listening. Lena saw him. For the first time since arriving, her face changed. Only slightly, but enough. He got the dog out, she said, almost to herself. Cale opened the door. Lena stepped inside and removed her gloves. She did not move too close to the shepherd. Smart. She let him see her hands. Smell the cold on her clothes. Decide what she was. The dog stared at her for a long time. Then he lowered his head. Not trust. Permission. Lena looked at Cale. The sheriff didn't build the system. That matters if you care about beginnings. But he protected it. Hid it. Warned it. When people got too close. At first, we believe it started as unofficial help during the hard winters. Fuel, medicine, supplies moved outside proper channels when the county was collapsing. And then the men who control illegal roads rarely keep them clean. Cale thought of Bryce's polished boots in the powerless clinic. Lena continued. Once the network had routes, drivers, storage, silence, it became useful to worse people. Bryce made himself necessary by keeping the town fed and protected from the consequences of asking questions. By the time he understood what he was protecting, if he ever cared, he was too deep to stop without exposing himself. Cale looked at the laptop. There are videos, he said. Routes. Documents. Good. Lena's voice did not warm, but it sharpened. That may be enough to move tonight. Maybe? Enough to open doors. Maybe not enough to close every one. The shepherd made a soft, broken sound. Both of them looked down. His eyes were on the laptop again. Cale understood before Lena did. He opened the screen and turned the volume low. The paused image showed the gaunt man's hand near the camera. Lena started. Her jaw tightened once. That's Aaron Vale, she said. The name entered the room quietly. The dog's ears lifted. Cale felt the movement like a verdict. Aaron Vale, the handler, the man who had told the dog not to wait. Lena took one step closer to the table. He was our source. Was? We never found him. The dog pushed one paw forward across the blanket. Not much. Just enough to touch the leg of the table beneath the laptop. Cale had seen men salute with less devotion. For a few seconds, no one spoke. Outside, the wind worried the pines. Inside, a dying fire painted the room with red and shadow, and a wounded dog lay between a former soldier and a federal investigator, holding a dead man's unfinished courage inside his body like a lantern under the ribs. Cale closed the laptop softly. What happens now? He asked. Lena looked toward the dark windows. Now we move carefully, because whoever came here tonight will report that you still have something. Bryce will know federal eyes are on you if he doesn't already. And if he thinks the dog carried more than you found, he'll come again. Lena did not soften it. Yes. Cale looked down at the shepherd. The dog was exhausted again, eyes half-lidded, body trembling under Ash's old harness. He had been thrown away, poisoned, hunted, and still somehow managed to deliver the truth to a man who had almost walked past the world's smallest sign of life. Cale picked up the USB and placed it on the table between himself and Lena. You said tell Voss, he said. Her eyes met his. Someone did, she replied. Not a smile, but something close to grief passed between the words. Cale looked toward the back door where the chair still braced the handle, then to the front window, where the glass reflected his face back at him, tired, hard-eyed, no longer just a man returned from a long absence. Outside, the county slept under frost and stars, pretending it had no secrets. Inside, its first secret had finally been named. Lena Voss did not stay near the windows. That was the first thing Cale Rowan noticed after she finished explaining what the USB meant. She moved through his old house like a person who had already drawn a map of danger in her head. She checked reflections in the dark glass without standing in front of it. She glanced once at the back door, once at the hallway leading to the bedroom, once at the ceiling where an old smoke detector blinked red every few seconds like a tired eye. The German Shepherd lay near the stove, exhausted after the break-in and the long effort of staying alive. Ash's old harness rested loose around his thin body, the black fabric and dark red stitching rising and falling with each shallow breath. His cream gray-black coat caught the firelight in uneven patches. He looked too fragile to be dangerous, too worn to be brave. But Cale knew better now. Bravery did not always stand tall. Sometimes it lay on the floor with needle marks under its fur and still watched the door. Lena took the USB and copied its contents to a secure drive she carried in a small case under her jacket. Her movements were efficient, almost cold, but there was no carelessness in them. She did not treat the evidence like files. She treated it like a pulse. "Who else knows you're here?" Cale asked. "2 agents positioned outside the county line," Lena said. "1 surveillance unit near the South Access Road. I came in quiet because if I brought a convoy to your front door, Bryce would know before I stepped off the porch. He may know anyway. He will soon." Cale looked toward the dark windows. "Because of the men who ran." "Yes, and because someone has been watching this house since you left the clinic." The sentence did not surprise him. That was how he knew it was true. Lena zipped the case shut. "Bryce doesn't need proof that you have everything. Men like him don't wait for proof when fear gives them permission to act." From the floor, the shepherd lifted his head. His ears did not rise fully, but his eyes sharpened. He stared toward the back of the house, past Cale, past Lena, toward the mudroom where the chair still braced the door. Cale turned. Nothing sounded at first. Then his old house spoke. A board creaked beneath weight that did not belong to wind. Lena's hand moved inside her jacket. Cale stepped toward the dog, not away from him. "How close are your people?" "Close enough if they hear trouble," she said. "That isn't an answer. It's the only one we have time for." A light flashed outside the window. Not headlights. Too low, too brief. A signal. The German Shepherd struggled to rise. His legs shook violently, but he pulled himself up anyway, shoulders trembling beneath the borrowed harness. A low sound gathered in his chest, raw and thin, like thunder trapped under ice. Cale reached for him. "Stay down." The dog ignored him. Lena's eyes moved from the animal to Cale. "He knows," she said. Cale did not ask what. He already understood enough. The shepherd had learned the rhythm of danger before Cale had found him. A scent near the door, a silence in the yard. The small shift in air before men came to finish what they had failed to bury. The first shot did not hit anyone. It shattered the kitchen window. Glass burst inward in a bright, cold spray. Cale shoved Lena down with one arm and turned his body toward the dog. The round punched into the cabinet behind the stove and buried itself in old wood with a heavy crack. The house erupted. Not in chaos. Exactly. Chaos was for people who did not know what to do next. Cale's body moved before fear could become language. He killed the lamp. Lena rolled behind the kitchen island, weapon drawn. The shepherd barked once, a broken sound full of pain, then staggered toward Cale, as if gravity itself had become something he intended to argue with. "Bryce?" Cale asked. "Or someone acting for him," Lena said. Another shot tore through the front room wall, lower this time. Then came the voice from outside. Rovin. Sheriff Nolan Bryce. No radio tone, no command bark, no public polished authority. Just a man in the dark, speaking from a place where pretense had finally failed him. "Send the woman out," Bryce called, "and put the dog down before this becomes worse than it has to." Cale stayed low behind the island, one hand pressed against the shepherd's chest to keep him from moving forward. Under his palm, the dog's heart hammered. Lena's jaw tightened. "He knows I'm here." "Your people?" "I sent an alert when the window broke." "Outside," Bryce continued, calmer than any man had a right to be. "You don't understand what you stepped into. This county was dying before men like you came back pretending rules were enough to keep people alive." Cale looked toward the broken window. Cold air moved in. carrying the smell of pine, gunpowder, and wet earth. "You cutting power to a clinic part of keeping people alive?" Cale called. A pause. Then Bryce said, "You think I wanted any of this?" There it was. Not confession, not apology. The old cloak men wrapped around rot when they needed it to look like sacrifice. Cale shifted toward the hallway. His pistol was in the bedroom safe, too far, but not unreachable if Lena held the room. Bryce's voice came again, lower now. "When the winters got bad, the state sent forms. I found fuel. I found medicine. I found drivers who would move what needed moving. People ate because roads stayed open that were never supposed to exist. And then people disappeared," Lena said from behind the island. Her voice cut through the dark house like wire. Bryce went silent. That silence told Cale more than denial would have. "You protected the road," Lena continued. "Then you protected the men using it. Then you protected yourself." Outside, someone moved along the porch. Cale saw the shadow cross what remained of the window. The shepherd saw it too. He tore free from Cale's hand. "No." The word left Cale sharp and low, but the dog was already moving. He did not have strength. Not real strength. His body was a ruin held together by refusal. Yet he launched himself toward the side of the room, just as a man came through the broken window frame. Boot first. Dark coat scraping glass from the sill. The intruder was not one of the same men from earlier. This one was younger, broad-necked, with a square jaw and close-cropped black hair visible beneath a pulled-down cap. His face had the blank concentration of someone following orders he had chosen not to understand. He carried a short weapon low in both hands. The shepherd hit him before he could raise it. Not with the force of a healthy dog, with the force of a dying oath. The dog slammed into the man's knees, jaws catching fabric and flesh. The intruder cursed and stumbled sideways. His weapon discharged into the ceiling, blasting plaster dust into the air like dirty snow. The shepherd cried out as the man kicked him hard in the ribs. Cale reached them in 3 steps. He drove his shoulder into the man's chest and took him down against the wall. The weapon skittered under the table. The man fought well enough to prove he had done violence before, but Cale was not fighting to win a contest. He was removing a threat. A knee, an elbow, a wrist, twisted past resistance. The man hit the floor and stayed there, gasping. The shepherd lay near the stove, curled inward around pain. Cale's world narrowed to the dog for half a second. That was when Bryce entered through the front door. He had a pistol in his hand. No badge visible now. No hat. His gray hair was damp from the night mist. His face lined and pale in the fire's dying glow. Without the clean frame of uniform certainty, he looked older. Not weaker exactly, but more human in the worst way. A man who had spent years explaining himself to himself and had finally run out of audience. Lena aimed at him from behind the island. "Drop it," she said. Bryce did not. His eyes moved to the USB case near Lena's knee, then to Cale, then to the dog on the floor. For the first time, hatred broke through the calm. Not loud. Not wild. Tired. "You have no idea what happens when this comes out," he said. Cale stood between Bryce and the shepherd. "I think you're scared people will finally know it already happened." Bryce's pistol shifted a fraction. Toward Cale, the shepherd moved. It should have been impossible. He pushed himself up with a sound that was not a growl, not a cry, but something older than both. His legs buckled. He rose anyway. Blood darkened the fur near his side, where the kick, or glass, or some older wound had opened him again. His eyes locked on Bryce. And then he stepped in front of Cale. One step. Only one. His body shook so badly the harness trembled against his ribs, but he stood there, thin and wounded and absurdly certain, placing himself between the gun and the man who had stopped beside the road. Lena did not breathe. Cale felt something inside him go very still. The shepherd was not obeying a command. No one had given one. He was not protecting a handler from memory. Not exactly. He was choosing in the present with whatever remained of his broken body. A creature once thrown away had decided, against all evidence, that one human life was worth guarding. Bryce saw it too. Something flickered in his face, and for one brief, terrible second, he looked ashamed. Then, Blue-white light flooded the windows. "Federal agents," a voice shouted outside. "Weapon down." Bryce turned his head. That was all Lena needed. She fired once, not at him, but into the doorframe inches from his shoulder. Wood splintered. Bryce flinched. Cale moved at the same time, driving forward, knocking the pistol arm wide. The gun hit the floor as men in dark field gear poured through the front and rear entrances. 2 federal agents took Bryce down hard. One was a tall black man in his late 30s with a shaved head, heavy shoulders, and calm eyes that missed nothing. His name patch read Hollis. He moved with the controlled force of someone trained to end danger without wasting anger. The other was a lean, younger woman with tan skin, dark hair braided tight, and a quick, hawk-like focus. She covered the room while Hollis cuffed the sheriff. Bryce did not fight once he hit the floor. Perhaps he understood. Perhaps he was simply tired. His cheek pressed against the worn boards of Cale's house, hands dragged behind his back, the polished sheriff reduced at last to breath, bone, and consequence. Cale did not watch long. He dropped beside the shepherd. "Evelyn," he said, though the doctor was not there. The dog's breathing was wrong. Too fast. Wet at the edges. His eyes were open but unfocused. Amber turned dim beneath pain. "Get Dr. Shaw here," Cale snapped. "Now." Lena was already speaking into her radio. Cale placed one hand on the dog's neck, careful, desperate, feeling the pulse flutter beneath the fur. "Stay with me," he said. The shepherd's eyes moved slightly. To him. Cale's voice broke before he could stop it. "No. You don't get to do that and leave. You hear me? You don't get to choose me and then leave." The room around them filled with commands, footsteps, radios, the metal click of cuffs, agents clearing corners, Lena giving orders. Outside, engines idled under the trees. The county's long silence had finally cracked open. But Cale heard only the dog's breathing and the faint, stubborn beat beneath his hand. Evelyn arrived 12 minutes later, in a wool coat thrown over her work clothes, hair half loose, face pale and furious. She carried an emergency bag in one hand and moved through federal agents as if they were furniture in her way. "Move!" she ordered. No one argued. She knelt beside the shepherd, checked his gums, felt along his ribs, examined the bleeding. Her expression tightened, but did not collapse. "He's critical," she said, "but not gone." Cale swallowed. "Save him." Evelyn looked up once. Not gently, honestly. "I'll fight for him," she said. "That's what I can promise." Cale nodded, because it was the only promise worth trusting. As they lifted the shepherd onto a blanket for transport, Bryce was dragged upright near the doorway. His face had lost all official shape. He looked at the dog, then at Cale. For a moment, it seemed he might speak, explain, justify, beg, but no words came. Maybe at the end, even he knew the difference between a reason and an excuse. The agents led him out into the cold. Cale followed Evelyn to the truck, one hand never leaving the edge of the blanket where the shepherd lay. The night had not ended. Not yet, but something in it had changed. The men who came to erase the truth had failed. The sheriff, who buried silence under duty, was in cuffs. And the dog who should have died in a black bag had stood between a gun and a man, as if some small, fierce part of justice had borrowed his wounded body for one more act. By sunrise, Cale Rowan's house no longer looked like a home. It looked like a place where truth had forced its way inside. The kitchen window was boarded with raw plywood. Glass still glittered in the corners of the floorboards no matter how many times someone swept. Mud streaked the entryway where federal agents had gone in and out through the night. The old chair that had braced the back door lay overturned beside the stove, one leg cracked from the pressure of bodies moving too fast through too little space. And near the place where the German shepherd had fallen, there was a dark mark on the boards that Cale could not stop seeing. Evelyn Shaw had taken the dog back to the clinic before dawn. Cale had followed in his truck, headlights cutting through the cold blue morning, one hand on the wheel, the other still feeling the phantom weight of the dog's head beneath his palm. Lena Voss had ridden with him in silence. She had not offered comfort. Cale was grateful for that. There were griefs too close to the bone for gentle words. Touched them too soon, and they turned savage. At the clinic, Evelyn had vanished into the treatment room with Mara at her side and the wounded dog wrapped in blankets. Then, the door had closed. and KL had been left outside it, waiting. A man who had once waited for extraction under hostile skies found the waiting room worse. There were no coordinates to confirm, no weapon to clean, no order to follow. Just fluorescent light, an old coffee machine, the smell of antiseptic, and the knowledge that a living creature had stepped between him and death with nothing but bones, fever, and a will too stubborn to understand fairness. Mara sat behind the desk, pale and quiet. Her strawberry blonde hair was pulled into a messy knot, and there were smudges beneath her eyes from a night without sleep. She did not cry, though once, when a metallic sound came from the treatment room, her hand moved to her mouth and stayed there. Lena stood near the window, phone pressed to one ear, voice low and controlled. By daylight she looked even sharper, compact and severe in her charcoal jacket, a woman cut from discipline and bad news. Every few minutes, she gave instructions to someone KL could not see. Search teams, evidence units, warrants, locations pulled from the USB, names from Aaron Vale's files. The county began to break open before the dog's surgery ended. Federal agents hit the first warehouse at 6:20 a.m. It had been registered as a relief storage depot outside town, a long metal building with snow-stained siding and a faded sign about emergency winter supplies. Inside, they found pallets of medicine marked for clinics that had never received them, fuel manifests rewritten by hand, crates with false bottoms, and ledgers that matched the files hidden in the harness. By 7:10, a second site was sealed. By 8, 3 drivers were in custody. At 8:30, Sheriff Nolan Bryce's office was searched under federal warrant while the town watched from sidewalks and half-open doorways. The sheriff's portrait still hung inside the front hall, Cale was told later. Bryce in full uniform, one hand resting on a flagpole, clean smile, hard eyes softened for public use. Beneath the portrait, agents carried out boxes of records, locked drives, route maps, and old incident reports that had never reached the state database. A kingdom of silence did not fall with thunder. It fell with paperwork, with copied drives, with sealed bags, with men who had believed loyalty meant keeping quiet, suddenly realizing that quiet could be used against them too. Near noon, Evelyn came out. Cale stood before she spoke. The doctor looked smaller than she had the night before, not weaker, but worn down, in the way only battle could wear down the merciful. Her dark hair had come loose completely now, falling around her temples. There was blood on one sleeve of her canvas jacket, not fresh enough to be alarming, not old enough to be forgotten. "He's alive," she said. Cale did not move. The words had entered him, but some part of him refused to believe them too quickly. Hope, when mishandled, could cut worse than fear. Evelyn understood. Her face softened only a fraction. "He's alive," she repeated. "Critical but alive. Bruised ribs, reopened tissue damage, internal stress from shock and dehydration. No major organ rupture that I can detect right now. He's not out of danger, but he made it through surgery." Cale lowered his head. For a moment he did not look like a soldier, or a rescuer, or the man federal agents had addressed with quiet respect all morning. He looked like someone who had been handed back a small piece of his soul and did not know where to put it. Mara made a sound behind the desk, half sob, half laugh. Evelyn glanced at her. "He'll need quiet, heat, weeks of care, and he's going to be a terrible patient." Cale breathed out, rough and almost amused despite himself. "Seems consistent." Lena came over then. She did not interrupt the moment. She waited just long enough to prove she knew there was a difference between evidence and life. Then she said, "Bryce is talking." Cale looked at her. "Not from remorse," Lena added. "From arithmetic. He knows how many records we have. He's trying to make himself useful before everyone else does." "What did he give you?" "Enough." That single word carried a weight that made Mara go still. Lena continued. "Names, transfer sites, the full chain, the people above the county level. He confirmed Aaron Vale was killed after trying to get the data out. He also confirmed the dog was sedated and dumped because they believed he was too far gone to survive." Cale's jaw tightened. Outside, the sky had gone strangely clear. Sunlight lay across the clinic parking lot, bright enough to make frost shine along the edges of tires and weeds. It looked like a morning built for forgiveness. Cale distrusted it. "What about the others?" he asked. "The missing?" He nodded. Lena's expression changed. "Not much. Enough. Some have been located alive. held under false work contracts, debt threats, transport coercion. Some had been moved out of state. Teams are coordinating now. She paused. Some won't come home. The truth settled between them, heavy but clean. Not all stories returned what had been taken. Some only named the thief. By evening, the town knew enough to stop pretending it knew nothing. News trucks arrived first at the county line, then outside the sheriff's office. People gathered in small groups, speaking in low voices that rose and died whenever a camera turned. The closed feed store opened its door for the first time that week, not for business, but because its owner wanted to stand where he could see. Mrs. Bell came to the clinic near dusk, with no cat, no carrier, and no excuse. The older woman looked smaller without a task in her hands. Her lavender coat was buttoned wrong, and her white hair had slipped from its pins. She stood at the reception desk until Mara noticed her. "I should have said something," Mrs. Bell whispered. Mara did not know what to answer. Cale, sitting near the treatment room door, heard. Mrs. Bell looked at him then. Her eyes were red-rimmed, but dry. "My nephew drove one of those routes," she said. "He told me once there were things in the trucks he didn't want to see. I told him to keep his head down." Her mouth trembled. "That's what we say here when we're scared. Keep your head down, like fear is weather and not a choice." KL said nothing. The woman turned toward the treatment room. "Is the dog alive?" "Yes." Mrs. Bell pressed one hand to her chest, as if the answer hurt. "Good," she said. "Good." She left without asking to see him. Later, Tom Arlen came. The retired lineman stood in the doorway with his brown cap in his hands, shoulders stooped under an old canvas coat. In daylight, his face seemed even more carved by loss. Narrow cheeks. Gray mustache. Eyes faded, but not weak. Evelyn led him inside. After a long look, he did not approach the treatment room door. He only stood in the hallway and spoke to Cale. "My boy worked under Bryce one winter," Tom said. "Temporary driver. Said they were moving medicine. Said it felt good doing something useful." His fingers tightened around the cap. Then he started coming home quiet. Then he stopped coming home. Cale's chest tightened. Tom looked toward the room where the dog slept. "Maybe that animal carried what my son couldn't." His voice broke only on the last word. No one rescued him from the silence that followed. Some silences deserved to stand. Though Cale did not know the word for it. Not a twist. Not a revelation grand enough for headlines. Just an old father standing before a closed door, realizing that justice had not arrived as a sword or a sermon, but limping, starving, wrapped in a black trash bag, with amber eyes and a refusal to die. 3 weeks passed before the German Shepherd left the clinic. By then, the county had changed in ways both obvious and invisible. Sheriff Nolan Bryce was formally charged. So were the drivers, storage managers, county clerks who had altered reports, and 2 men above the county level who had treated rural desperation as infrastructure. The relief network was placed under federal review. Actual aid arrived, clean this time, watched by people who had learned that kindness without honesty could become a mask for rot. Some townspeople thanked KL. Some avoided him. Some looked at him as though he had set fire to the only shelter they had ever known. Cale accepted all of it. Truth did not owe anyone comfort. Evelyn kept the clinic open. Mara stopped flinching every time the bell over the door rang, though she still looked up too quickly. Mrs. Bell returned with her cat, and a pie no one asked for. Tom Arlen came once more, and left a worn brass dog tag at the front desk. Not his son's, Mara later explained. His son had never worn one. It was from an old hunting dog that had followed the boy everywhere when he was young. "For luck," Tom had said. Evelyn tied it to the clinic's corkboard with a piece of twine. The German Shepherd noticed it the day Cale brought him home. He was still thin, still bandaged, still moving carefully as if every step required a private negotiation with pain. But he was alive in a fuller way now. His eyes were clearer. His coat had begun to lift again from the skin, the cream and gray returning under the grime of survival. The old tactical harness was gone for good. Ash's harness had been cleaned and adjusted, but Cale did not put it on him that day. Instead, Evelyn handed Cale a simple leather collar. Brown, plain, soft from her own hands working the edges. "No red trim," she said. Cale took it. "No red trim," he agreed. The dog watched them both from the blanket near the clinic door. Evelyn crouched first. "You're going with him," she told the shepherd. "Try not to judge his housekeeping too harshly." The dog blinked. Mara sniffed behind the counter. Cale looked at Evelyn. "Does he need a name?" "He had one once," she said, "but that life used him." Cale looked down at the dog. The shepherd held his gaze. Not pleading, never pleading, choosing slowly or allowing himself to be chosen. "I'll wait," Cale said. The drive home was quiet. At the house, repairs had begun but not finished. The kitchen window was new glass now. The back door had a stronger lock. The floor still bore faint scars if someone knew where to look. Cale did not cover them with a rug, not yet. Some marks needed to remain visible until the lesson settled. He set a bowl of water near the stove. The dog stood just inside the doorway, studying the room, the place where he had fallen, the window where the man had come through, the table where the USB had been opened, the chair beside the stove where Cale had waited through the first night. Slowly, he stepped forward. On Pav, then another. Cale lowered himself into the chair. He did not call, did not pat his knee, did not command. Outside, late sunlight moved across the pines, turning frost to brief fire along the branches. Inside, the old house creaked as if clearing its throat. The dog came to him at last. He stopped close enough that Cale could see the scars under the growing fur, the places where straps had rubbed, the places where men had mistaken a living creature for a container. Cale rested one hand on his own knee, palm open. "I'm not promising easy," he said quietly. "I'm not promising safe, but I'm here." The shepherd looked at him for a long time. Then he lowered his head onto Cale's knee. No grand gesture, no sudden joy, only the weight of a survivor deciding, for one breath at a time, that staying might not be the same as surrender. Cale placed his hand gently against the dog's neck. "Stay," he whispered. The dog closed his eyes. And for the first time since Cale had come home, the old house did not feel like a place holding its breath. It felt like a place beginning again. Sometimes, miracles do not arrive with thunder, bright lights, or angels standing in the road. Sometimes, a miracle is nothing more than a small sound coming from a place everyone else has learned to ignore. A torn bag by the roadside. A wounded dog refusing to die. A man who could have kept driving, but didn't. And maybe that is how God often works in our daily lives. Not always through grand signs, but through quiet moments that ask us who we are. A person in need. A truth we are afraid to face. A chance to do the right thing when no one is watching. Cale did not save the whole world that day. He simply stopped. He listened. He stayed. And because he stayed, a life was saved. A hidden evil was exposed, and a broken creature learned that not every human hand brings pain. Maybe that is the lesson we carry from this story. God can place purpose inside the smallest moment. A choice that seems ordinary may become the door through which grace enters. So wherever you are watching from, may you have the courage to stop when others pass by, to speak when silence feels safer, and to stay when love asks something difficult of you. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs a reminder that goodness still exists. Leave a comment and tell us which moment stayed with you the most. And if you believe stories of loyalty, courage, faith, and second chances deserve to be heard, please subscribe to the channel and join us for the next story. May God bless you, protect your family, guide your steps, and give you strength to choose what is right when it matters most.